You ever notice how some stories refuse to settle? Years pass, trials end, headlines fade, and yet people still ask the same quiet question. What really happened that night in Perugia? I'm serious. Think about it this way. A 21-year-old student travels to Italy for a semester abroad. New country, new friends, cobblestone streets, old stone houses, late dinners and laughter drifting through narrow alleyways. The kind of experience people dream about. But then one night in November 2007, something happens inside a small apartment on Via della Pergola, and by the next morning, everything has changed. A young woman named Meredith Kercher is gone, and what follows isn't just a murder investigation, it becomes one of the most controversial criminal cases in modern history. Conflicting stories, global headlines, courtroom battles that go on for years. Here's what I mean. This case isn't just about a crime. It's about confusion, accusations, and a truth that people still argue about almost 2 decades later. So the real question is this. How did a quiet study abroad apartment turn into a mystery the world still can't fully agree on? Before we continue, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Okay, let's proceed. Before we get into the details, it feels important to set the scene for a moment. This video looks at the murder of Meredith Kercher, a 21-year-old British exchange student who was living and studying in Perugia, Italy, in 2007. Meredith had come to Italy for the kind of experience thousands of students dream about. A year abroad, new friends, a small apartment shared with roommates in an old university town, late nights studying, quick walks through narrow streets, ordinary student life. The kind of chapter that's supposed to be exciting, maybe a little chaotic, but ultimately safe. Then one November morning, everything changed. Meredith was found dead in the apartment she shared with other students. And almost overnight, what happened inside that small home in Perugia turned into one of the most debated criminal cases in recent history. Investigations, arrests, courtrooms filled with reporters. Names like Knox and Raffaele Sollecito suddenly dominating headlines across Europe and the United States. Here's why I want to say something clearly before we go further. This video is not here to sensationalize tragedy. The goal is educational. We're walking through the murder of Meredith Kercher, the investigation, the evidence, and the complicated legal process that followed. Think of it less like gossip about a crime, and more like sitting down to understand how a case unfolded, piece by piece. No graphic descriptions, no shock tactics. Because at the center of this story is a real person. Meredith wasn't just a headline from 2007. She was a daughter, a friend, a student with plans that stretched far beyond that year in Italy. So as we go through this case, that's the perspective we're keeping. Careful, respectful, and focused on understanding what actually happened. Before anything else, it helps to remember who she was when life was still normal. Meredith Kercher wasn't someone people described as dramatic or loud. If anything, friends said she had this quiet warmth about her, the kind of person who listens closely when you talk, the kind who remembers little details about you later. She grew up in England, in a close family with her mum, dad, and siblings. Home life mattered to her. Sunday dinners, teasing her brothers, the ordinary stuff most people rush past. She studied at University of Leeds, focusing on European studies. Languages interested her. Travel did too. She liked the idea of seeing the world slowly, learning how people lived in different places. So when she got the chance to study abroad in Perugia, Italy, it felt like one of those moments young people wait for. A new country, new streets to get lost in, new friends. And here's what I mean by normal life. She went to classes during the day, studied Italian phrases, grabbed coffee with classmates, took photos of old stone streets and historic buildings like every student who suddenly finds themselves in Europe for the first time. Sometimes she called home just to chat. Nothing urgent, just life. She shared an apartment with other students, including Knox. Different personalities, different routines. Meredith was known for being responsible, organised, the one who actually kept up with her coursework. She liked structure. But she also knew how to enjoy herself. Friends remember movie nights, music playing in the apartment, laughing about cultural misunderstandings, planning little weekend trips. The small things that make studying abroad feel like the beginning of something bigger. And if you step back for a second, think about it this way. She was 21, learning a new language, living in a beautiful Italian city, building friendships, figuring out who she wanted to be. Not a headline, not a case file, just a young woman in the middle of a life that was still unfolding. Then one night, that routine broke. On November 1st, she spent the evening out with friends in the city. Later that night, authorities say she returned to the house she shared with several roommates. At some point during the night, investigators say a violent crime occurred inside the residence. The next day, her roommates noticed something was wrong. The house was unusually quiet. Doors were locked, personal items appeared out of place. Eventually, police were contacted, and when officers entered the home, they discovered that she had been killed. And that's when the case quickly became international news. One of her roommates, Amanda Knox, along with Knox's boyfriend at the time, Raffaele Sollecito, soon became central figures in the investigation. Authorities questioned them extensively in the days that followed. Here's what made the situation even more complicated. Investigators were trying to understand what exactly happened inside that house during the night. Evidence from the scene pointed to the involvement of another man, later identified as Rudy Guede. Think about it this way. Within just a few days, a quiet student apartment in Perugia had turned into the centre of one of the most debated criminal cases in modern Europe. Multiple suspects, conflicting accounts, and intense media attention from around the world. Court proceedings stretched on for years. Verdicts were issued, appealed, overturned, and reviewed again. In the end, Guede was convicted for his role in the crime. Knox and Sollecito were ultimately acquitted after a long series of legal battles. But for Meredith's family, the legal twists didn't change the core truth. A young woman left home to study abroad, and she never made it back. And the questions about that night in Perugia still linger for many people who followed the case. Think about that for a second. New country, new friends, a little shared house in Perugia. The kind of chapter so many young people dream about. And then, it was gone. Here's what I mean. When people talk about this case, the conversation usually turns to the trials, the theories, the endless arguments about who did what. Names like Amanda Knox and Raffaele Sollecito get repeated over and over. But the centre of the story isn't the courtroom. It's her empty seat at family dinners, the phone calls that never came, parents who had to fly to another country for the worst reason imaginable. And the truth is, that's the real ending of this story. Not the verdicts, not the debates, just the quiet, permanent absence of a 21-year-old woman who should have had decades ahead of her. If there's one thing worth remembering from all of this, it's simple. Say her name. Remember her life. Meredith. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.